What's one of the most passionate projects that you worked on that you're most proud of?
I would say the work that we're doing to reunite children with their wrongfully accused parents. We've been able to publicly reunite roughly about 10 families in the last year and a half. The federal government is subsidizing state child protective service agencies. They give them money every time they accuse someone of abuse. Whether it turns out to be true or not, it's kind of a federally subsidized child trafficking under the color of law.
But why? For what reason?
Money. It's entirely how they get funded now. A couple weeks ago, I spoke with Matt and Tucky for the first time in, 2 years. They were watching a movie at home with their kids. I thought, if it wasn't for us, those two parents would be in prison for 40 plus years, and those two kids would spend their entire lives believing that they had been abused by their biological parents. That's the difference between saying, there's not much I can do, government's really bad, and saying, no, I'm going to find a family, an individual, a small business, whatever, that's being hurt right now, and I'm going to help them fix that. The head of defects, the CPS agency in Georgia, saw some of our content, and she completely switched sides, contacted us, and said, this is terrible, I had no idea, how can I help? Instead of going to them and saying, we hate you, we want the worst things to happen to you, if I ever see you, I'm gonna do this and that to you. Instead saying, listen, what you're doing is wrong. Here's why we know it's wrong. Here's what we think you should be doing instead. Join us in doing the right thing. We've had mayors resign, sheriffs resign, city council members resign, city attorneys resign. We've had some people say, you know what? I was wrong and you were right. And they join us.
I'm Kelly Siegel, and this is Harder Than Life, a podcast about self-love, self-awareness, business, and health. We tell outrageous stories and boil everything down to simple, practical advice you can start using today. Let's get living. Welcome back, HTL Nations. Kelly Siegel. I had the distinct honor of meeting today's guest at the Freedom Fest while I was a speaker. I got to know him and I got to watch him. He didn't even know that I went into the crowd and watched his interview with the one and only Daryl Davis and got to see his beautiful style. We're going to talk about all kinds of things today, but Spike Cohen is a firebrand liberty activist, former Libertarian vice presidential candidate, and the unstoppable force behind You Are the Power, a national nonprofit laser-focused on fighting injustice and restoring human dignity. After selling his successful web design firm, Spike turned his energy toward direct action and principled, nonpartisan activism that produces real results. He trains communities to call out corruption and is on a mission to end government abuse, one family, one victory at a time. Welcome, my new friend, Spike.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me on. It's great to be on.
Man, in today's climate, it's just perfect to see you on my calendar and see you on the show. We're going to talk about You Are the Power. We're going to talk about local activism versus politics. We're going to talk about government. We're going to talk about libertarianism. So we're going to go all over the board here, and I apologize.
Absolutely.
Because in today's climate, there's a lot to talk about. So let's start it off here to not confuse people. What is You Are the Power, and how did it start?
Yeah, so at You Are the Power, we find people who are having their lives absolutely torn apart by out of control local and state level government officials. We alert the public to what's happening. We direct the public's ire not at the government or specific government agencies, but the actual individual people who have phone numbers and email addresses. And we direct thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of people at these individual people and say, hey, back off and do the right thing. Stop doing whatever the thing is that they're doing. As simple and almost childish as that sounds, we've had a 100% success rate for the last 2 years and a roughly 90% success rate since we launched about 3 years ago.
What's one of the most passionate projects that you worked on that you're most proud of?
I would say the work that we're doing to reunite children with their wrongfully accused parents. There is, and we can get more into it later, but because it's a long rabbit hole to go down. But long story short, the federal government is subsidizing state child protective service agencies. They give them money every time they accuse someone of abuse, whether it turns out to be true or not. And so basically, any time that there's any possible reason that CPS can accuse a parent of abuse, they do. And the more they can actually take their children from them, put them in jail, any of the things that they do, they get even more money. So it's kind of a federally subsidized child trafficking under the color of law.
But why? For what reason?
Money. Money. It's entirely how they get funded now. Their entire funding structure, it's perverse incentive. The entire funding structure, about 30 years or so, well, no, about 40 years or so ago, they changed Title 4D of the Social Security Act because state child protective service agencies were saying, we don't have enough funding. We have all these abuse cases and we have no way to fund it. Someone thought it was an absolutely brilliant idea to say, okay, well, every time you have an abuse case, we'll give you X amount of dollars. Well, what do you suppose happens there? If you subsidize apples, you get more apples. You subsidize corn, you get more corn. If you subsidize abuse allegations, what are you going to get? And that's exactly what's happening. Not only that, but because the agents are, that the caseworkers are incentivized to just make as many accusations as they can, actual abusers go under the radar because most actual abusers are trying to cover their tracks. Whereas an innocent parent who has a kid whose legs have small fractures because they have like Ehlers-Danlos or some kind of connective tissue disorder or something like that, they have no interest in covering their tracks. There's no tracks to cover. They're happy to talk with the police when they show up to ask questions. They're happy to talk with the investigating pediatrician when they ask them questions. What they don't know is that they're building a case against them so that they can wrongfully take their children from them.
The reason why I want to have you on, especially now, besides you're just an amazing human being. By the way, I watched your interview, and that was a tough interview because Daryl was a very
crazy,
but it was great. It was tough because he was very demanding and very dominant, but you handled it. My girlfriend looked at me and went, he's good. you did a great job. So
I was standing next to a giant. This is a man, for those who don't know, Daryl Davis is a black man who befriends Klan members and has gotten roughly 200 of them to quit the Klan. I was just honored to be on the same stage as him, to be perfectly honest. I'm glad the interview went well. I was having a fanboy moment the whole time I was up there. I love the guy.
Oh, that's what it was. Kind of what I'm doing right now. I want to explain to the users about, so you ran for, you were a vice presidential candidate. I'm talking so fast because I'm so excited. I want to get everything out and share with the listeners. So I apologize. We were at the Freedom Festival, both speaking, and the Freedom Festival is about the Libertarian Conference put this on. Explain to us, the listeners, what the Libertarian Party is and what's going on in the world right now. Why do we need a third party?
So the Libertarian Party is the third largest party in the U.S., which is similar to saying, like, if you have an SUV and a sedan and a Matchbox car, the Matchbox car is the third largest of those three vehicles. So I like to tell people I came in third place, which sounds a lot better than we got like 1.5%. But we did come in third place for whatever that's worth. The Libertarian Party is the third largest party in the country. We're based on the precepts of libertarianism. And I boil down libertarianism to what I call the principle of human respect, which is a very simple one. When government is respecting us as individual human beings, they're not imposing themselves on us. They're not infringing on our rights. They're not taking too much from us. They are allowing us to live as individual human beings. We are at our most happy, our most prosperous, our freest, our most harmonious. And conversely, when they do it, the more that they do impose themselves on us and treat us as something other than an individual human being, we're worse off all the way. And so, libertarianism as actual policy looks like very, very low taxes, very, very low regulations, a government whose only real purpose is to protect lives, rights, and property, and leave everything else to us to make those choices. And when I say us, I don't just mean us as individuals. I mean charities and corporation, businesses and ventures and people going out there and finding the right solutions and coming up with a way to actually serve the market, as opposed to a bunch of politicians and bureaucrats and cronies figuring it out and, screwing everything up.
Is the end goal liberty or reform?
Reform towards liberty. I mean, the end goal of libertarianism is maximal liberty. We don't have a situation where we can snap our fingers and make the government that we want appear instantly, even though really, if you look at the Constitution, it's pretty darn close to what we wanted. So it should be that way. Unfortunately, it's not. We understand that there's going to have to be reforms. There's going to have to be give and take that happens. So it's a reform movement in that way, but our end goal is nothing short of a revolution to bring us back essentially to what the founders intended. Actually, probably even less government than they intended.
I love that. When I got asked to speak there, I immediately went down the rabbit hole of libertarianism, and I was like, whoa, I agree with everybody. That's why I agreed. I was like, this, and then I get to meet you, and I want to educate, because we're in the craziest time. I mean, I'm going to be 50, and I almost feel like back in the wartime where it's like no taxation without representation. It's like, is this government like completely lost on serving the people? both sides, and all they do is fight each other and throw stones at each other. How are you supposed to get anything done? And especially when there's zero accountability in this world right now.
Yeah, so I think what this speaks to is that for many people, they're waiting for the government to help people, quote unquote. And the problem is that's not actually what government should be doing. Let's talk for just a second about what government is. Government is essentially a monopoly that imposes itself through violence. And so that's like how it is structured, right? So it says there's not going to be any other government competing with me. That would be called treason or a civil war, or that would be fought, that would be met with violence. If another government tries to come in, that's called an invasion, and we're going to fight against that. And so there can be a usefulness for government, right? The purpose of government can be to act as that coercive entity. This is called minarchism, the idea that you have a minimal government whose purpose is to protect against things like invasion, to set a standard for things like property rights and contract law and things like that, to enforce that, in doing so, to affirm and defend our rights. And that's really it. Maybe, getting involved, having some relation with foreign governments and things like that, allow for trade and both within the country and between other countries and things like that. But as soon as the government starts saying things like, hey, you know what? We could help with healthcare. We could help with housing. We could help with this or with charity or with this or that. The problem is any other organization has, and anyone in entrepreneurialism or anything like that already knows what I'm saying. So I'm retreading what most people watching this probably already know, but any other organization has feedback mechanisms built in. When I had a web design company, if people didn't like my websites or they thought they were too expensive or whatever, they could choose to go to someone else. Right? They could say, I don't like your services and I'm going to go hire this person instead. But if I imposed myself as a monopoly and said, not only do you have to use my services if you want a website, you have to use my services even if you don't want a website. Do you suppose my websites would be very good? Do you think I'd provide much good value? And people shake their heads and go, yeah, of course not. But that's what the government is. We're expecting an organization whose model doesn't allow for feedback mechanisms. We're expecting them to provide us with good service. Well, of course they're not going to provide us with good service.
6-7 minutes in, and it's great. This is exactly why we're on. So when the system feels too big to fight, what do you tell the average Joe?
Well, see, that's actually a big part of why I started You Are the Power. When you talk about the system, the government, or even Congress or the White House, or even at a lower level, if you say, what's the common phrase? You can't fight City Hall. What's City Hall? It's like 6 people who probably live within 3 miles of you. But when we talk about government, we fall for the fanfare. We see human beings who are just as unimpressive as the rest of us, right? And the only difference, in fact, very often they're far more mediocre than a lot of us. But what's the difference between us and them is they go into these big fancy buildings that we paid for. They put these, they sit behind these fancy daises that we paid for. They put these fancy little name badge things, name things on the desk there that we paid for. They use these very fancy seals and on these really nice letterheads that we paid for. And then they tell us what to do with our money. That's why I actually call it You Are the Power. The idea of government power, it's all illusory. It's a fallacy. The only real power is what we as a collective of people assent to. And if enough of us, it doesn't even have to be a majority of us, if even a relatively small percent, 3 to 5% of us say, yeah, we're not going to do this. It's not they can't really effectively force us to. We saw this with the mask mandates early on in COVID. They would try to impose it. And if a large enough group of people is like, yeah, I'm not doing that, even if it was still on the books, they kind of stopped enforcing it because they couldn't. And cannabis, another example of this. Marijuana is still 100% illegal across the country, and yet the majority of people live in a city or a state or a county where it's legal for at least medicinal purposes. Government power doesn't really exist. You are the power. That's the whole message behind You Are the Power. So that's what I tell people.
That's strong. The challenge becomes there's just, and again, I started off that way, there's just no accountability. So they can do whatever they want and there's no consequences. What other system in this world can you get promoted for doing a bad job? That's our government. Yes. You look at our top, I mean, Kamala and what's her name? They're 2 of the poorest districts in the country. Yeah. We're going to be president and Speaker of the House. How can we not put KPIs into place that says, here's what your district has to be before you can run for any other government? Why can't we we have to do it in corporate America? I own several companies. I couldn't just go gobble up another company because I wanted to.
Yeah, you'd go bankrupt. You'd go bankrupt if you did. And if you tried doing a lot of the things they did, you'd end up in prison. I actually give this as an example. Social Security, we all have to pay into Social Security. If you or I said, you know what, we're going to create this powerful new annuity, and we literally just copy pasted the Social Security Act as our model, we'd go to prison for racketeering and Ponzi scheming, because that's literally what it is. And that's true, again, of government. We could put KPIs in place, but the problem is it would be the government in charge of determining if the KPIs were met or not, right? So this goes back to the core problem. Government as a structure, and it's not replace this politician with this politician. They're operating the same machine. Government as a model, if we call it a business model, government as a model does not have an effective feedback mechanism because it can't. It has to be a monopoly. It has to be imposed by violence. It has to be funded primarily through extortion. And the only way that you can have action within a system like that is for that system to be doing as little as possible and for the rest to be left to the free market and the private sector. And again, that includes charities, that includes individuals just choosing to work together. The private sector doesn't have to mean Fortune 500 companies solely. It's all of us. It's us voluntarily choosing. Because if you and I come up with a solution and it works really well, fantastic. If at some point it's not working that great, we'll have competition. People will start going to them. Even better, right? The market is working itself out. But if we impose ourselves as a government, we do whatever we want.
I love it. I love it. If you had 1 week of complete immunity from legal or political consequences, what change would you make?
In government?
Yeah, and make it more widespread than CPS, because I know listen, I love CPS and I want to ask questions about that versus ICE in a minute, but universally wide, globally wide.
Oh, globally wide. Globally wide, I'd have to take some time on it. I can say nationwide, if I had immunity, what I would be doing is I would be cutting our government back to what the founders intended, and then maybe a little bit more, because I think the founders might have not quite foreseen just how quickly things were going to start. They basically created a chia pet, and it looked really good at first, and then it just keeps growing. I think I might be a little bit more clear in some of the Bill of Rights and things like that. But the bottom line would be I would go through all of these decades of executive orders and get rid of just about all of them, because first of all, it's sketchy constitutionally how they were even introduced. And if they're not there to protect our lives, rights, and property, then why is it there for? And the answer to that is it's probably there to protect some special interest that put the right politician in place to make it happen. And so I would undo a lot of that. Put it this way, if I had an immunity long enough, by the time it was lifted, I think there would be ticker tape parades for me, and we wouldn't have to worry about things moving forward.
Ladies and gentlemen, he's modest.
But no, it's the ideas. It's not me. It's the idea behind it. Taxes would be, if not zero, they'd be pretty darn close to it. Our government would be structured in such a way that we were no longer running up debt. You mentioned taxation without representation. Every dollar that is run up in debt becomes somewhere between $2 and $3, depending on the interest rate, over the next 40 years, which means it's mostly paid off by people that aren't even born yet. You want to talk about taxation without representation? We're currently paying off interest on debt that was run up before any of us were born. And that's the problem. It is it's not just taxation without representation. It's taxation with interest without representation. I'd put an end to all of that. I would get the Federal Reserve entirely out of. I'd end the Fed, but I also get the federal government out of money entirely. Especially in the era now of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, there's no reason that the market can't meet the needs of currency. When you put the government in charge of money, you create money now is serving primarily a political need instead of a market need, which is why its value keeps going down. Because if you or I were in charge of deciding what money was going to look like, it would be something that would at least retain its value and possibly even gain in value over time. But if we're politicians and we're constantly running up debt, and our main goal is to reduce the impact of the debt that we've run up, the best way to do that is to make that debt less valuable by running up more money that we can then lend to ourselves again. But what does that do? It steals everyone's value. Since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913, the US dollar has lost roughly 98% of its value. Let me put it this way. Imagine if your money was worth 50 times what it is now and everything cost about the same what it does right now. How much more could you do in life? How much more quickly could you save up for a home, to do your own business, whatever else? That's how much they've robbed us over the last 100 or so years. So those are the types of things that I would do if I wouldn't go to prison afterwards.
So I'm a staunch proponent of term limits, age limits. I want to abolish the two-party system. Since you did run for office, did you run models at all if they had done where it was a 3 or more party system. Have you ever seen any data models run like that? Like if it wasn't Republicans versus Democrats, if it opened to everybody, have they ever done any models to see if a third party system, if it wasn't one versus the other? Because it really is.
I mean, it would be a lot of guesstimating in the US, but we can look at other countries that have more vibrant third parties. Like, I mean, even in Canada, there's effectively 3 real parties there. There's about 6 main parties, but 3 of them that actually are in contention for who's in charge. Most other countries are like that. The biggest problem here isn't that third parties are banned or anything like that. Coming out of the Civil War and coming into the era of like Teddy Roosevelt, you start seeing the beginning of introduction of what they call ballot access laws. And the justification was essentially that we need to make sure, right now, any Tom, Dick, and Harry could be running for office. We need to make sure they're serious. And so, you would have stuff like, in order to be able to run for office, you got to get like 50 signatures just to show you're serious. So we don't end up having like 1,000 people on the ballot. Okay, fair enough. In Tennessee, if you want to run for anything other than a Republican or Democrat, you need to get 50,000 signatures. Even if you're running for office in a town that doesn't have 50,000 people, you need to get 50,000 signatures. And since the rule of thumb is actually double that, because all of the courts are run by Republicans and Democrats who do everything they can to try to invalidate the petitions that you bring of signatures to get you on the ballot. And they'll literally do anything they can to invalidate the signatures, entire pages at a time. So you actually need to get 100,000 signatures. And that's true in many states. In 2020, when we ran, we were on all 50 state ballots, plus Puerto Rico and DC and Guam. So we were the last libertarian ticket that was on every possible ballot. Since then, they've ratcheted things up even worse, so that the most recent ticket, the Oliver Termott ticket, they were only able to get on 40-something states, and they were the only other third party that could get anywhere near that. Everyone else was like, I mean, RFK Jr., part of the reason he dropped out was he was only able to get on like a couple dozen state ballots. Yeah. Kanye West, who is a literal billionaire in 2020 when he ran, he was only able to get on like 11 state ballots. That's the biggest problem, is ballot access.
We need to open it up to everybody and make it a true democracy. They don't want it, because they can't just split it and have 2 people fighting one versus the other. And you see, here's another thing I would pass. I would have a spending limits, like they have salary caps in professional sports. Here's the same amount of money for everybody. You can't get more. So this way you don't get special for your campaign. And you don't get to keep the money afterwards. It's insane. $2 billion Kamala Harris spent to try to get elected. What is that saying? It's saying that the person who has the most money is going to win or come in second.
Right now, with this so-called big, beautiful bill, Thomas Massie and Rand Paul. So you had 2 people in Congress who were saying, guys, we need to be spending less than last year, not more than last year. And as a result, the Republican Party is trying to primary them out so that they can't run, so that they can't be in office anymore. 2 people aren't allowed in Congress to say, hey, I think we should we all ran on promising to be fiscally conservative. I think maybe we should actually do it. And the Republican Party and the Trump administration is like, no, absolutely not. No, you can't do that. And that's the problem. And we see the bait and switch that happens. And this is very common on both sides. So when the progressives are in office, they want to increase the budget. And when people come out and go, we're already spending too much, we need to spend less, they go, you don't want to have people to have health care. You don't want people to have affordable housing. And we're like, no, but you're making those things more expensive with this, and we want less of it. What conservatives do is they'll go, you don't want to fix this border nightmare? You don't want America to be safe from foreign threats? It's like, no, we do, but we don't have to spend $6 trillion to do that. There's a way to do that without spending that much money. This is why Elon Musk has kind of gone off and is now looking to make his own party, because, Elon Musk is not necessarily, I'm not sure he fits well into a conservative or progressive or libertarian mold. He just understands, he's a numbers guy. He's looking at the numbers, and he realizes that we are quickly reaching a point where no matter how much we tax the American people, it wouldn't be enough to pay the interest on the debt we've run up. That's called insolvency. And when that happens, back in 2010, 2011, Greece defaulted. They reached that point of insolvency, and it sent that small country, Greece, it sent shockwaves through the world economy, because they just basically went insolvent and said, we can't pay off all this debt. Imagine if the biggest economy on earth went insolvent. Elon sees what's coming.
Yeah, he single-handedly, in my opinion, saved democracy by buying Twitter, because what was happening on the left
speech,
side was,
yeah, absolutely.
was even more egregious than what we're seeing on the right. I am quickly becoming like, I love this country, but I am quickly becoming, I do not like our government. I do
That's called
not like the way
patriotism.
they're. It's sad. I'll give you, for instance, I own a large IT cybersecurity company, and they had a employee tax credit. If you kept everybody employed, they give you it's a substantial amount. 3 years I'm waiting on that. If I didn't pay my taxes for 3 years, I'd be in jail.
Yes.
So it's amazing to me. So real quick, and we'll wrap up government, and then I want to get into the You Are the Power, because it's amazing. When you told me back in the green room, I'm like, what? You do what? And it's just amazing. So we're going to get into that. What scares you more, government power or public apathy?
Gosh, that's a real chicken or egg question, because the reality is, if it wasn't for public apathy, then you know what? I'm kind of edging towards public apathy, because public apathy doesn't just apply to government power. It applies to a lot of things, right? If we ended up with some other kind of imbalance of power, they'd be equally apathetic to that. I think I have to lean towards public apathy. Yeah. And that actually shows in the work I do. Part of what we're doing at You Are the Power is, yes, we're helping these individuals and families along the way, but we're also exposing people to the fact that these things are happening in the first place. And we're kind of jarring them a little from their notion that, like, that the government is serving them well. It's not. And you could potentially be their next victim. We want to prevent that, not just by helping people that are victims now, but by waking you up to the fact that this is happening, and you don't actually have to take it. You can fight City Hall. We fight City Hall routinely, and we win every time.
If any of the listeners are thinking we're talking crazy, just go back and research any of the COVID mandates, any of them, including the mask mandate. Read RFK's book. It's so eye-opening how it goes back to, Fauci goes back to the AIDS epidemic and what he was doing to the government back then. Yeah. It is freaking scary. So if you think that what we're talking is crazy, just go back and research it. That they came up with the 6 feet because it just sounded good.
The study that they kept citing was, I forget if it was a high school student or a college student, but it was a student who hypothesized that having everyone stay 6 feet away from each other would help in the case of a respiratory virus, not even specifically COVID, not even specifically a coronavirus. Just, oh, well, if people stayed apart, that might help a little bit. They formed policy on that. And on the lockdowns, all of that was the lockdowns were based on, in 2005, the Bush administration was told that any minute now, bird flu was going to start transmitting from human to human.
Wait. Hold on a second. Who said that one, by the way? Who brought up bird flu?
Anthony Fauci.
There you go.
Anthony Fauci came to Bush and said, bird flu any minute now could go and spread from person to person. And bird flu has a 90% fatality rate, roughly. So that's a very scary thing. So Bush said, okay, create a plan for it. The plan they created, they dusted off 15 years later for COVID, whose fatality rate is similar to the flu.
You do realize that, I know you've read the book too, is that he dusted off the AIDS pandemic before that. Yep. And then before that, I think it was cancer. At the end of the day, that's where the accountability happens. There's a reason why when Biden left office, he blank pardoned people, especially Fauci, for things that haven't even happened. Can you say
that they haven't even been accused of, things they might do in the future? Yeah.
That's where the government's not working for you. So let's talk about how You Are the Power focuses on local government rather than DC. Why do you see that? It's kind of like the Walmart approach, but in reverse. Because Walmart goes to the rural areas, it works its way in. It's crazy.
Well, listen, your mouth to God's ears that we're as successful as Walmart's been, but I guess it's a good model. But the short answer is, libertarians, we're very good at being right, and we've gotten used to losing with a lot of dignity. And so we've learned to be right and lose valiantly. And I'm like, no, half of that's good. It's good to be, actually, I guess 3/4 of it's good. It's good to be right, and it's good to do things valiantly. It's not good to lose constantly and be okay with that. And so I said, let's start basic. Let's start with a city council that's trying to steal someone's home because one of the council members wants to buy it for pennies on the dollar on the the auction block. Or let's someone that has been wrongfully arrested and everyone knows it, and the police are refusing to release the body cam footage, which would completely exonerate the guy. These are not hypotheticals, for example, by the way. These are all like actual things. Let's look at individual examples at the local level, at the county level, the city level, the municipal level, that not only can we show this is happening in people's backyards, but we can get a few hundred people together to put pressure on them and they'll actually back off. And so we tried it in 2021. We took on a couple of like cherry-picked examples, and we had no budget. We hadn't formed a 501 nonprofit or anything like that. We just wanted to see if it would work. It sounded like a good idea, but so do a lot of things I've said, but not all of them are great ideas. So let's try it. That's the thing about being an entrepreneur. You learn that a lot of your ideas sound great, don't work great. So let's try it. So we went out there and we had a 70% success rate. I said, okay, that's pretty good. So then we launched in 2022 and we've hit the ground running. We started at the local level. We're now getting at the state level. We actually just got legislation passed in Georgia, which fixes a lot of the CPS abuse problems at the pediatrician level, which is where most of the abuse was happening there. I think we're within a couple of years of if we can continue to build the critical mass necessary for people to understand the true root of this problem with CPS abuse, I think we'll be able to get a fix to Title 4D so that the federal government's no longer subsidizing this.
How did you fixate or focus on CPS? And why is CPS in my mind reminding me of ICE right now?
No. So ICE is immigration enforcement. CPS is child protective services. And
I know that, but understand this. What I mean by that is right now, ICE is running rampant on going and arresting everybody and anybody, whether they're violent, whether not, anybody who's not.
For a similar reason. They have quotas put in place and their funding is based on meeting those quotas. It's
so you see why I was putting those two and two together?
You got it figured out because you're seeing the same thing. You intuitively got that you've got this agency that, why are they doing this? Like, why? Well, why do most people do things? Money. And so if you look at the funding, if you look at the incentive structure, you very quickly see what the problem is. It's one thing to tell ICE, listen, find criminals, find gang members, find people who, didn't report that they had committed crimes when they were renewing their visa or whatever, and go and take them out. If instead you say you have to detain and deport X number of people every week or every month, what's going to happen? They're going to railroad people because they have to. They'll get replaced with someone else who will railroad them. And we see that with CPS abuse. You asked what got me focused on this to begin with. It actually came to us. We were working on local stuff, eminent domain abuse, zoning abuse, people being wrongfully arrested, charities being threatened with arrest for helping people in need. And then someone that came to us, a foster family, that said, we watched children who were pretty sure their parents were wrongfully accused of abuse. Here's all their info. And I told my team, listen, we need to vet this heavily, more heavily than we've ever vetted anything else, because I don't want to inadvertently help an abuser. And so we spent upwards of 100, my team spent upwards on 100 hours vetting this cause. And what we found out was that this family, Matt and Tucky Hernandez, when their younger daughter, Emma, had bruising and swelling, she was a newborn at the time, she had swelling in her legs. They took her to the hospital. The hospital did, blood work and x-rays. The x-rays showed that there were small fractures at various levels of healing. The blood work showed that it was likely being caused by a chronic health condition.
Oh.
In the normal world that we would expect to exist, the pediatrician would go, oh my gosh, let's do further testing. Let's figure out what treatment this poor kid needs so that she can, get better. Instead, a child abuse pediatrician took one look at her and said, cha-ching. They accused them of abuse. They took both of their children, not just the one that had the fractures. They were both arrested for felony abuse. And as a condition of their bond, they had to agree not to talk to each other or be within a certain number of yards of each other, which means overnight, they not only lost their children, they lost each other indefinitely. They lost their entire family. They both went and tried to get their kids' medical records. They spent thousands of dollars to get them. As soon as they got them, they saw this was clearly being caused by chronic health issues. They hired medical experts. The medical experts said, yep, this is absolutely being caused by chronic health condition. She needs treatment. This is serious. They took it to the family court. Family court judge wouldn't even allow it to be presented as evidence. She instead took the word of the child abuse pediatrician, who brought no paperwork whatsoever, and his sole evidence was saying, yeah, when you see these types of fractures, statistically, they tend to be caused by abuse. When the attorney asked him to cite the source of that statistic, he said, you can look it up on the internet. Based on that incredible amount of evidence, the judge ordered non-reunification, which means that the children are now up to be placed for permanent adoption, and Matt and Tucky will never see their children ever again. That's around the time we found out about it. We vetted it heavily. We put it out there. Almost immediately, thousands of people were angrily contacting the family court judge, the caseworker supervisor, any email addresses, any phone numbers we were putting up, they were contacting all of them. Two things happened. Number one, everyone made a 180. The judge went from ordering non-reunification to ordering reunification. DFACS, which is Georgia's CPS agency, they closed their case out and said there wasn't any evidence of abuse. They completely backed off entirely. And as a result, Emma and Aria were able to live with their aunt and uncle because the criminal charges were still pending. And so until those criminal charges were pending, they couldn't live with Matt and Tucky. So that was the first thing that happened. The second thing that happened was families came from out of the woodwork all over the country with the exact same story. We vetted those stories, exact same thing. That's when we found out about Title 4D, and we realized this is a federally subsidized child trafficking operation being done under the color of law. Now, fast forward a little bit. We have not only reunited multiple families across the country, especially in Georgia, but across the country.
How many? Like, give me ballpark. Give me some numbers. First of all, two things. Sorry to cut you off.
If you include people where we've been able to intervene before it's become a big public thing, it's in the dozens. We've been able to publicly reunite roughly about 10 families in the last year and a half. Now, we've talked with people that have reunited, that have been organizations that have been working on this for decades, who have reunited one or two families over the course of decades. So we've made incredible headway. More importantly, we have gotten legislation passed in Georgia called Ridge's Law, which makes it so that the child abuse pediatrician has to, and this is going to sound insane that this had to be a law. The child abuse pediatrician has
My jaw's
to
on the ground, just so you know.
What's that?
My jaw is still on the ground.
Yeah,
from just all of
as
this.
is mine, which is why I have to pause occasionally. The child abuse pediatrician has to actually review the child's medical records before accusing the parents of abuse, because they didn't have to do that before. They could just wing it.
That little small detail.
And they have to actually attest to it in their name. What would happen at a lot of these hospitals is you didn't even know who accused you. They put the name of every single child abuse pediatrician that the hospital employs on the same paper, so you don't even know who you were accused, who accused you, which is unconstitutional, by the way. But anyway, so that's the first thing. And the second thing is the parents now, see, when they were accused of abuse, they weren't allowed to get a second opinion. They weren't even allowed to get their kids' medical records. It wasn't guilty until proven innocent. It was guilty and not allowed to prove that you were innocent. Now they have the legal right to get a second opinion at their expense, and they have to be informed of it, or else they can't be accused of abuse. Those two things we think are going to eliminate at least 80 or 90% of the false accusations right there. In addition to that, we have gotten multiple lawmakers from other states reaching out to us saying, hey, we want to fix it in our state too. So we're looking at the domino effect now of getting at a state by state level, finding out specifically what's happening at their state that's like the worst things to fix, and fixing them there, eventually building up to the critical mass necessary to get it changed at the federal level so that the subsidization of abuse accusations ends. Going back to the Hernandez family, the first one that came to us. Last month, Matt and Tucky Hernandez, I actually went to the verdict day of their trial. In a family court, it's very arbitrary. The judge just gets to decide if you're innocent or guilty. In a criminal court, there's it's innocent until proven guilty. It's beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a jury of your peers. What we didn't know was that the judge planned on railroading them and putting them both in prison for 40 years. He wouldn't allow the jury to see any of the medical evidence except for the x-ray showing the fractures and the opinion of the child abuse pediatrician that she was abused. They weren't allowed to hear from the arresting officer who didn't think they did anything wrong. Have you ever heard of a prosecutor saying we don't want the arresting officer to testify? They weren't allowed to hear from DFACS that they had closed their case out because there was no evidence of abuse. They weren't even allowed to hear about that case. They weren't allowed to hear.
You're piling on. This doesn't sound like it can happen in the United States of America.
I promise you're going to be glad that you let me finish. I promise.
Sorry.
No. It's because it's bad. It's bad. You're not the first person to say it. I can't hear anymore.
It gets worse. Wait, there's more.
No, listen, it's only going to get worse, but then it will get better.
Okay.
They weren't even allowed to hear that Emma and Aria loved their parents. All they were allowed to hear in trial was that there was fractures and that a pediatrician thought that they abused their kids. But here's also what happened. Every single day that jury saw that the entire court gallery was filled with Matt and Tucky's supporters, their church, their families. You were the power volunteers. They saw that the only people who were there that thought that they had abused the kids were the court employees, the prosecutor and the prosecutor's people. They saw that everyone else was there for Matt and Tucky Hernandez. And between that and the incredible work of Catherine Bernard, their defense attorney, they saw through the ruse and they voted not guilty on all counts. Matt and Tucky Hernandez, and then shortly after, the family court judge said, "Great, you get your kids back." A couple weeks ago, I spoke with Matt and Tucky, and they were, for the first time in 2 years, they were watching a movie at home with their kids. I actually got to worship in church with them that a couple days later, and tears came to my eyes when I was watching them. Matt holding one of his daughters, and they're up there singing the hymns and singing along to it. And I thought, if it wasn't for us, those two parents would be in prison for 40 plus years, and those two kids would spend their entire lives believing that they had been abused by their biological parents. That's the difference between saying, there's not much I can do, government's really bad, and saying, no, I'm going to find a family, an individual, a small business, whatever, that's being hurt right now, and I'm going to help them fix that.
Spike, that was bananas. I've never heard anything like that. And you sit there and think, like, is that even possible that it happens in the United States of America? And the answer is, unfortunately, yes.
A lot.
The sad part about it is that luckily that family had enough money to defend themselves. So had they not had that, they also would have been railroaded. So
they're kind of like working class. They went through all the money they had. They're going to be paying off debts for many, many, many years to come. They at least have their kids back. And they're not in prison for the rest of their lives. But there are most of the families we work with, they lose everything financially in the process. We do everything we can to help with trial costs and things like that. But by the time we've found them, they've already lost everything. Very often, they're about ready to just plead guilty, knowing that they'll lose their kids because they feel like they're going to lose their kids anyway. They have nothing left to fight, and at least they won't go to prison for the rest of their lives. That's where people are very often when we find them. And instead, they get their kids back. They get their lives restored. But yeah, unfortunately, they get stuck with 5 and 6 figures of debt.
Oh, it's terrible. I just realized that I know how you do this, but you're leveraging social media to put pressure on how exactly does this work? What are you guys doing? What is You Are the Power doing for this particular judge who was acting nefariously? Walk us through the process.
Yeah, so the process is, when we find out about a cause, like I said, we vet it heavily to make sure it's legit, but also to get all the particulars. Yeah, sure, the government's doing this to you. Who specifically is doing this to you? Who is the caseworker? Who is the judge? Who is the prosecutor? Who is the DA? Who is the city council member or the mayor or the chief of police? Or who are the specific individuals involved? And what are their publicly available email addresses and phone numbers? So we get all that information together. We actually come up with a wording template for people to use, because by the time they've seen our posts and our videos about these families and individuals that are being harmed, most people don't have much constructive to say in that moment, understandably. Like what they want to say to those officials isn't very constructive. They might just have a lot, and we get it. We get it. So what we do is we put out this content, videos, posts, all sorts of stuff, explaining in great detail exactly what happened. They're like mini documentaries that we put out. I sent you some of the video. Some of these videos are like 10 minutes long because we have to really explain all the details of what's happening. And then at the end we go, all right, if you go to this page on our website, it has all the people you need to contact, and we even have wording you can use. But here's something that we say, and this is something that I think this is our secret sauce. We tell people, as much as you don't want to right now, be respectful when you contact these people. I am as angry as you are because I know even more details than you do, so I'm probably even more angry than you are, but this isn't about how I feel or how you feel about this. And it's not about how those public officials feel. It's about getting this family reunited or getting these charges dropped against this wrongfully accused person or whatever the cause is we're working. It's about helping these people. And the best way we can do this, and this is a real tough one, is to reach out to these public officials from persistently and insistently, but from a standpoint of love and a desire for reconciliation. So I, as a Christian, am called to not just love my neighbor, but to love my enemy and pray for those who persecute me. Now, there's a biblical reason for that. It's not because necessarily because it works, quote unquote. It's because God forgave me when I was being his enemy, and so I should do the same for my enemies. But it turns out it actually does work. The head of defects, the CPS agency in Georgia, our greatest opponent was the head of defects. Her name was Candace Brose. Then she saw some of our content and she completely switched sides, contacted us and said, "This is terrible. I had no idea. How can I help?" This is what happens when, instead of going to them and saying, "We hate you, we want the worst things to happen to you. If I ever see you, I'm going to do this and that to you," instead saying, "Listen, what you're doing is wrong. Here's why we know it's wrong. Here's what we think you should be doing instead. Join us in doing the right thing." Some people will back off and do the right thing for political expediency. A lot of people resign because they don't want to do the right thing. We've had mayors resign, sheriffs resign, city council members resign, city attorneys resign, all sorts of people. We've had police resign. We've had all sorts of people resign. That's fine too. We've had some people say, "You know what? I was wrong and you were right." And they join us. We were having a 70, 80% success rate when we'd come at them hard and insult them and attack them and cyberbully them. When we switched it and said, "You know what? We want you to join us. We think that you actually consider yourself a good person, and we suspect you've at somewhere in your head, you've convinced yourself this is necessary, or you're doing what you have to, or you're breaking eggs to make omelets, or whatever nonsense you're telling yourself, but you know that's not true. Why don't you confess you did that and repent of it and come join us?" 100% success rate.
The entire time, that was the best advice that you kill them with kindness.
Yeah.
It's so often we come in guns blazing and people meet you where you are. And one of the worst times, it was actually involving Child Protective Services in my life. I was talking to somebody and their advice to me was assume positive intent. I said, "How can I assume positive intent? They're coming after my kid." And and just by making that assumption, you were able to think clearly, be emotionally intelligent, and not fight fire with fire, and really just kill them with kindness and get the outcome. You focus on the outcome, not
exactly. It's 100%. Now, some people will hear what I'm not saying. So don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying be a doormat. I'm not saying, well, don't just send them an email and go, "Hey, I'm going to pray for you. I love you." Like, no, consistently and persistently create a movement of people contacting them saying, "You're going to do the right thing. You're either going to do it because you recognize the error of your ways and you're joining us to do the right thing, or you're going to do it because it's the politically expedient thing to do, or you're going to resign and whoever replaces you will see that it's politically expedient to do the right thing. Either way, it's going to happen. Why don't you come join us?" But we don't do it from a threatening manner. We don't do it from an angry or insulting manner. We just say, "Listen, you know this is wrong. We know this is wrong. You know that we know this is wrong, and we know that you know this is wrong. Come join us in doing the right thing. All is forgiven. Just come and do the right thing." And it has been, when the head of Department of Human Services came to our event in Atlanta and shook my hand and said, "I want to be a part of the solution," and then demonstrated it by being a part of getting our legislation passed in Georgia, that was when I recognized that, in the Bible, one of the greatest persecutors of Christians was a man named Saul. He ended up becoming the Apostle Paul, who wrote like 2/3 of the New Testament. We are creating Saul to Paul moments where our greatest opponents become some of our greatest allies.
So good. You're just a beautiful human. How can people support You Are the Power?
If you go to youarethepower.net, you can become a member. You can donate. You can join our newsletter. Actually, if you become a member, that lets you join our newsletter as well. You can follow us on social media. We're on what are we on? I'm on everything, but You Are the Power is on Facebook, X, YouTube, Instagram, and Threads. So if you can find us on there at YATP official. But if you go to youarethepower.net, you can sign up today. You can become a member. So for those who are considering donating, for every paid hour of work we do, we get hundreds of volunteer hours. We have a staff of 10.
Beautiful.
We are a nationwide organization with a staff of 10, including me, and literally thousands of volunteers. Our work is primarily driven by people who are doing this for $0. Many of them are actually donating themselves to the cause. So if you decide to donate, you can know one of two things. You can know two things. Or actually three things. Number one, it's greatly appreciated. Number two, it's used very well. And number three, we spend every part of the penny when we get it.
I bet you're glad you're out of that web design, especially with AI nowadays.
Oh, yes, very much so. I am glad that I'm no longer doing something that ChatGPT can do in 3 seconds. Yeah.
I'm in the thick of that. What's the long-term vision for scaling your mission nationwide that you just talked about? How can we take this bigger?
Ultimately, the scaling is happening on its own. As we are growing, so too are the number of people coming to us for help growing. So too are the number of people that are volunteering to help growing. So too are the people that are opening their wallets and their time to be able to help us. It's kind of happening. The way I say it is, my end goal is to reach a point where we're not needed anymore. Or maybe we're still needed, but it's just a matter of like, we already know that there are instances at local government where there are people who end up not doing something that they were going to do because they don't want the heat from us. That's kind of the end goal, is to reach a kind of critical mass where officials either want to do the right thing, or if they don't want to do the right thing, they still do the right thing because they don't want to deal with someone like us. Ultimately, like I said, I think we're within a couple of years of being able to get a federal change fixed on this thing. And once it's there, I think it's off to the races. I think this just keeps scaling up as necessary.
You mentioned your 100% success rate, but has there ever been a case where you've changed your mind at the halfway point, or that we got it wrong?
Not yet. That could certainly happen in the future. We're fallible human beings. I will attribute that to our literally only one in its class vetting that we have. We are streamlining, and when I say one of a kind, we've had investigative reporters and very high level attorneys see our vetting operation and say, no one else is doing this. Like, we are literally, because of the volunteer hours, the volunteers that we're able to put into this, we spend hundreds of hours vetting our CPS causes. Our non-CPS causes sometimes just take a few hours. If someone's been arrested for speaking at their city council, there's a few hours of body cam footage to look at. Maybe you read there's not as much to do. But like with our CPS cases, we have doctors doing forensic work on the medical evidence. We have people volunteering at all different levels. When an attorney takes on defending one of the clients that we're working with, we're usually able to give them literally everything that they need to defend their clients because we've already done all the vetting and prep work. As of yet, we've never had to back off and say, you know what, we were actually wrong. It could happen in the future. I hope not. But I will say our one-of-its-kind vetting has thus far allowed us not to have to do that.
Spike, you're a beautiful human doing great things, full of energy, full of passion. And so what's next for you?
More of this. It's funny, in 2024, many people in the party tried to draft me to run for president. And I said, listen, I could spend the rest of the year running for third place, a valiant effort that it would be. I've already done that, or I could continue helping people right now. And I'm not demeaning anyone that decides to run for office as a third party, and I'm not even necessarily ruling it out in the future. Right now, I think where God wants me is exactly where I am right now. I think that he wants me to continue scaling this up, to keep helping people, to keep driving home the underlying principle behind what we do, that people need to be respected as individual human beings, and just to keep growing and scaling from there.
One last question that I've always wanted to ask someone in your situation, and
Sure.
I know the answer because eventually someone's going to change the system. But Ross Perot put one hell of a scare and ultimately shifted that election. Why does someone run when they perceive that they have no chance at winning?
So when I ran, the thing that I would say when people would say like, well, you're going to lose. And I'm like, I'm going to lose anyway. The people that are running, if any of them win, I know I'm already going to lose. I'd rather lose on my feet. I'd rather give other people an opportunity to vote for something. If they already know they're going to lose, no matter which side of the duopoly wins, which side of the uniparty wins, I want to give them a chance to vote for something they actually agree with. If you're going to lose anyway, lose voting for what you actually like, what aligns with your principles, what you think would actually fix this. So yeah, I mean, we know that we're a protest vote. At least now we are. Like, if you run it in a third party right now, there are third-party people that get elected, but it's typically lower levels of government, state level, local level, and things like that. At the federal level, you're pretty much almost always a protest vote. Otherwise, they just stay home and don't vote. So you're giving them a chance to at least express that I don't agree with this. This is what I would do if enough of us joined it. And the thing is, if that can build up enough momentum, then eventually people realize that their vote won't be thrown away if they vote for it. So if you're going to lose on your feet.
Love that answer. Last question, I promise. Was the 2020 election honest? Did you believe the results of that election?
So there's two different questions there. One, do I believe that Joe Biden won the election fair and square? And that's answered by my answer to the second question. All you have to do is run for a third party one time to know that the system is entirely rigged. Did he win legitimately? Possibly. Did they throw it for him? Possibly. I put it this way. I wouldn't put it above them because they rig it against us every single election, not just for the White House, but in every single race they rig it against us. So if they rig it against us, who's to say they wouldn't rig it against Trump or rig it against, I don't know, Ross Perot or anyone else that's running? Who's to say they didn't, they're rigging it against everyone. So why not rig it against Trump too? So do I know for certain that Joe Biden stole it? No. Do I think that's what they do to everyone else? Yes, absolutely. So maybe they added one more person to the list of people they were rigging it against.
Historically, about 110 million people vote for president.
Yeah.
There was 81 million for Biden, 71 million for Trump. That's 160 or 152 million.
Yeah.
Where'd the other 40 million votes come from?
They ostensibly came from people who don't typically vote. So like a
40 million
people. What's that?
40 million, and then it went right back to the 110 in this past
went
election.
Right back to
so
20,
the one
to
election. Anyways, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. This is what
that's precisely why I say they could have absolutely rigged it. Here's the thing. I mean, how many states were just allowing all these absentee ballots, and they're like, well, we're vetting. How do you vet a letter? Like, how do you know that came from that person? Yeah. And especially when they were doing like vote harvesting and all of it, like ballot harvesting and all this. So when I'm saying I don't know, I'm not saying like, oh, I'm saying I literally don't know. I don't like making accusations. I like speaking very accurately. So I don't know. Could they have done it? They absolutely could have. Would they do it? They absolutely would. They do it to us every single election.
Spike, I hope for one day that you do jump back into some political climate. I find you highly intelligent, very gregarious, and very kind. And you're what government needs. We need to drain this one. We need fresh blood and we need fresh thinking. And you're a person that I would love to see governing us. I will say this, that I hope from all the Harder Than Life Nation that we live to see a third party candidate win. I really do, because I think that will absolutely send shockwaves and give us reform. And I'm going to live to see it, and so will you. And you've got a new friend in me, and I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. We just went all over the board, but I was, if you watch this episode on YouTube, guys, my jaw was literally, my mouth was wide open the entire time. I was scratching my head and itching my ear because I was like, I can't believe what I just heard. So I'm not going to have to tell people to share this, but please, so we can get more and more amazing guests like him, give us a follow, give us a rating, and we're going to continue growing. And until next week, be harder than life. Thanks, Spike.
God bless, guys. Thank you, Kelly.
Please rate and share this podcast. I'm active on all social platforms and love to hear from my Siegel supporters. Each and every episode is sponsored by my company, National Technology Management, the easiest and best IT company to do business with, delivering peace of mind with technology every day, even simplifying cybersecurity. Visit trustntm.com for more info. Until next week, be harder than life.